Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So we are rolling along in this series, talking about the selves, personality types as they relate to different aspects of ourselves. Self-trust, self-confidence, self-esteem, different versions of how we see us showing up in the
Different
world.
ways that we interact with ourself, our relationship with ourself.
That's a great way to put it. So on this episode, we want to talk about self-worth and self-value.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be honest, I'm having a little trouble getting my head around some of these distinctions. As we talk, we spent a while talking about this before we hit record. And I think in order to make this go well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to defer to your accuracy or introverted thinking with ENTP preferences. And anywhere I get confused, I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'll just ask the question that I legitimately have to parse this out, because there's a little confusion. And again, we talked about personality types and self-esteem on the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were talking, I was degenerating and I was getting lost in the weeds of the content. And so I went, wait a minute, let's just kick on the mic and the cameras. Let's go ahead with this and let's unpack it in real time.
Yeah. Well, this is not very good because that makes me think that there's like 80% of people's personality types are not going to find very much value in playing this all out. So that's my little hesitance, because this might be a very introverted thinking or accuracy way of like looking at all of this.
I think it is. I think it is definitely, we're making distinctions around things that somebody might say that doesn't need to happen.
Right.
Which introverted thinking or accuracy has a tendency to do.
Yeah.
And also, as we were talking, I'm like, there is value here. Like I can feel the value here, and I want to pursue it.
Okay.
So as we talk, let's just start with self-worth, because we were talking about when we originally started talking, I was looking at these as almost a dichotomy of some sort. And I was like, no, that's not accurate. But there's a relation to self-worth and self-value. So let me articulate self-worth from my perspective. And then we can go into self-value and then make a distinction between those two things and self-esteem we talked about last episode. Self-worth to me is the inherent quality of something as it is just because it is. So in the last episode, I made a distinction between worth and self-esteem. And I said self-worth is the act, like if you wanted to look at a house that was being sold on the market, it's the materials that are in the house, like the actual wood and brick and flooring and lights and fixtures and all the things that make the house the house. That's its worth. If you were to estimate that house, you have to compare it to other houses in the neighborhood, the location, the time in history it's being sold, because some houses are estimated higher in the past or less in the past and more now, or vice versa. So you have to take all that into account to estimate how much somebody's willing to pay for that house, including the factor of how much somebody's willing to pay. That's part of the estimation. And those two things are separate. And so we talked about worth versus estimation. I get that. When we start talking about value, now I get a little confused. Now my confusion comes into value. And so I'm going to just take the hit, look foolish in front of the world here to say that I'm getting lost in the weeds of value, because I understand that estimation is how we measure things and worth is the inherent quality. So where does value come into this?
Right. Okay. So I understand that this is probably pretty pedantic, and I'll do my best to explain why I think flaying all of these out has value to it. So I don't actually think that there is conceptually a huge difference between self-esteem and self-value. I don't think that there's a massive difference between these two things as a result.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that the underpinning of this entire series was self-awareness and finding different access points to understand more about how we experience ourselves. What is our relationship to ourselves, particularly as we're talking about things that help us rest into who we are and feel better about who we are and how we're showing up, so that we're not burning all this mental bandwidth trying to self-soothe around our low opinion of ourselves. So it's not so much that these are all wildly different concepts, and it's really important to understand and flay out how they're distinct from each other. It's more that as we raise our self-awareness or raise our awareness of our relationship to self, how do each of these distinctions, whether or not they're just like 1 degree of separation or possibly have different access points, how does that help us relate back to taking an honest assessment of our feelings about who we are. So self-worth, I agree. There's an inherentness to self-worth. And we can talk about that in a moment, like sort of what that might look like. I think the distinction between self-esteem and self-value, which I think is actually the thing that you're having trouble filleting out, is that esteem is related to metrics, right? And the reason why that helps us gain self-awareness is, or at least for me, what are the metrics I'm using?
And what tools am I using to measure them?
Exactly. And are those tools calibrated? So what am I estimating? I'm estimating my value. So esteem or estimation is the tool. The value is the result. So the reason why I think it's good to separate those out is that if I'm going to look at self-esteem, I'm going to ask myself higher quality questions about what I'm using as a criteria. It's more about what is the instrument, what is the tool, and is it calibrated?
Okay.
Value and the distinction between it and, say, self-worth, because I agree. I think self-worth, and as we talked about in the original podcast around self-awareness, self-worth is an inherent value. It's a value I come with, right? Just because I am a living organic creature that has consciousness. And there's value in other kinds, inherent worth, rather, in other kinds of creatures and other kinds of creation, right? There's worth in animals. There's worth in, I would argue, vegetation. There's worth in the planet that we live on. There might even be some conceptual or existential worth in the universe itself. But there's an inherent worth that we all come with when we're born. Value is our usefulness.
So could we say value is actualized worth?
Mm-hmm.
So a seed is worth something. When that seed becomes actualized worth, it becomes a tree, and now it's got value because I can cut it down. I can use it for firewood. I can, it can have multiple purposes, or it can just replicate itself. Like it's got inherent value.
That's right.
And produce more seeds.
That's right. And that the difference between the value of the tree and the estimation is, are we estimating the value of the tree based on its fruitfulness, or are we estimating its value based on its ability to be chopped down and turned into a house? Are we estimating its value based on its ability to create firewood? Are we estimating it based on its ability to give shade? Like, what's the criteria we're using to estimate its value? So the self-esteem conversation was more about how are we valuing it as an individual? How do we come pre-wired to determine our own value? And are those good instruments, and are they well calibrated? But I have value outside of those estimations. My self-esteem is going to be associated with, say, for me as a personality type, my introverted thinking or accuracy and my extroverted feeling or harmony. But I also have a lot of other value, right, that go beyond those pre-wired, estimations. Right. And just understanding that helps me tune into whether or not I'm doing a good job of esteeming myself, knowing that those are going to be my sort of default settings. And then the conversation around self-value reminds me to get out of just being locked into that tool or those estimations, and also see the holistic picture of the value. It goes above and beyond. And I think that's one of the reasons why I understand I'm slicing these pretty thin. Yeah. But I'm doing that because at least it helped me to keep a finger on the pulse of all these different access points to my relationship to self. I am more than whatever my introverted thinking or accuracy tells me I am. But I need to know what my introverted thinking or accuracy wants from me in order to meet those criteria. If I am resting on my laurels and I am not gaining competence in anything, and I'm not getting better, and I'm not improving myself, and I'm not being intellectually honest or logically consistent, my brain has a default setting that says, you suck.
Yeah.
And if I'm not listening to that and I'm not getting better in that way that my default wiring tells me to get better, I'm just never going to build self-esteem because my brain keeps saying, you suck. You should be doing this better. So I need to know that about myself. If there's a part of me, like extroverted feeling or harmony, that says, are you sure you're giving to the world? Are you sure? And I go, I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't have very many friends, I guess. I don't have very many connections. I guess I'm not really doing much for the world. Oh, I'm a terrible person. But I don't recognize that that's a place of uncertainty almost by design. And if I believe that, even if I'm really competent and capable and I'm doing better all the time, but I'm listening to this voice that goes, yeah, but nobody likes you. I've got to keep my finger on the pulse of that. I got to go, no. It's not that nobody likes me. It's just this is a part that reminds me to contribute. Am I contributing? Yeah, okay. You can call that voice extroverted feeling or harmony. I don't have to listen to it. I need to hear it, but I don't need to believe it. I need to listen to it, but not believe it, I guess is the way I'd say it. Okay, that's the esteem part. That's why I separate that out, because that's keep giving me, it's making sure I have the finger on the pulse of that thing, those messages. They're just going to come whether I want them to or not. So once I have that dialed in, now I can look at the other aspects. I can look at worth and value. Do I have self-worth regardless of what those messages say? Do I have worth no matter what my judging functions are telling me?
I think so.
Yeah, I do too. And then what's my value? Is it stuck? Is it limited to what I'm pre-wired to look at with my estimations? Or is there more value available here?
Okay, so this asked the question in my mind, or the question comes to me from your perspective, based on that framework. Do you believe that worth is static? In other words, it just is. It's not a metric. It doesn't grow or shrink. Now, value does, but worth is it's a constant, just because it is.
No. I think worth is inherent, but I don't think it's static.
Okay, so it's dynamic in your mind.
Well, I would say more it's on a timeline. Okay. So
I want to walk us through some actual real life thinking, if you don't mind, and maybe land this for somebody that's listening.
Yes, but let me flay out this idea just a little bit more. Okay, so worth, and I'm gonna go back to the etymology of the word, right? Worth has a concept of, I'm just going to check my notes here because I wrote it down, value, price paid, merit, monetary, and inherent. That's the noun. The noun is like worth is what is inherent to like how much are you willing to pay for this thing? Okay, now life is priceless, arguably. So what are people willing to pay in money for life? Anything. Right. Just the ability to exist. We will pay anything for it to continue to exist. So it is a priceless experience. Our worth and the ability to continue to live can't be measured, right? And there's an inherentness to that. Like all of us want to keep living. That is inherent. But the verb of worth is to come to be. So if you're looking at it as a noun, like nominalized, I do think that that's static for the most part. But I think if you're looking at it as a verb, as something that is dynamic, it's what comes to be. So as a baby, I'm born, right? And I actually don't have any value other than
potentiality,
cuteness.
though.
That's right. I'm cute, and so people think I'm cute, and that's my value. But actually, I'm just taking like crazy. I'm a massive resource hog.
Okay, you've already lost me because you're using a different word than worth now. You used value again.
Excuse me. My worth is intrinsic and inherent.
Correct.
But it's not demonstrated.
It's not manifested yet.
Not manifest.
Or actualized.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for making sure that I'm keeping consistent with my language. So yeah, as a baby, I'm just a major resource hog, right? Okay. I'm just a vacuum of a time, energy, money, expense, emotion, right? But the reason why we all protect babies is not just because they're cute. We protect them because of what they're going to become. They're going to become, adults. They're going to become, right, arguably either contributors or takers. But we don't know yet, right? And so we want to protect this thing that's precious, that is going to become something. And so the worth of a baby into adulthood is whether or not that thing has manifest or come to be. It's intrinsic, whatever it was, right? Has it become the thing that it was? And we understand the importance of stewarding children and giving them the best experiences and examples and models possible. And we are horrified even when children we don't know on the other side of the world that are concepts to us are abused. That's horrifying to us because we know that throws them off the trajectory of what they could have become, right? Now we're playing with their worth. And so as adults, we don't have the same worth as we do as babies. in the sense that as babies, we're all potential. And as adults, we are the manifestation of potential. And if we stayed on a trajectory and we were fortunate enough to be fostered and encouraged and stewarded to stay on that trajectory of what we could have become, our worth arguably increases because now we're giving back to society. Now we're doing the things that, like we became who we were supposed to be. If we don't stay on that trajectory and we become terrible takers, right? We're horrific human beings that just cause destruction everywhere. Our worth alters. Right? Because we didn't become who we were supposed to be. We became this sort of offset version of it, this sort of, mutated version of what we could have become. And if we're just taking, now our worth plummets. So I don't think our worth stays the same. But even if our worth plummets, like it's very rare where people say, no, just kill them.
Yeah.
Right? And it's usually a segment of society.
Yeah.
Even if somebody's a terrible serial killer, there will still be people out there fighting for that person's right to live incarcerated, right? So it's like we have an intrinsic value, intrinsic worth of the existence of living. So it's more of a concept, it's more theoretical worth of humanness. And then our individualized worth is more based on how we manifested that worth on a timeline.
So as we're talking, maybe my confusion was just around words. Because as you talk about the verbal, like the verb, worth, the manifestation, the actualization of potential. So the seed becoming the tree, the child becoming an adult. When it manifests, it becomes worth even more than it once was. And maybe that's what I thought by the word value. Like worth is inherent. Value is the actualized potential of worth.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's the performance of it.
So could we say the verb of worth and value are really the same thing? And maybe that's where my confusion was when we were talking before we hit record.
Well,
or is there a distinction between the actualized worth and value? And I'm sure introverted thinking or accuracy in your personality, you probably have a distinction around these.
I think the only reason why there should be a distinction is if somebody is in a position where they are not manifesting their value, they're not performing it out. I do believe that there is something to be said for somebody resting into the inherent worth they have as a human being. That's the only reason why I'd create a distinction.
Well, yeah, but isn't that still the inherent aspect of worth? I mean, we're into philosophy now. I don't know.
We are getting pretty philosophical, and I'm sorry for that.
Yeah. Can I use a real world example?
Yes.
All right. So this is going to get personal to you.
Okay.
Your sister passed away like almost 20 years ago now at the time of this recording. She was in her early 30s. She had she was epileptic and she went into a seizure and didn't recover, basically.
Right.
But she didn't die right away. She went into basically a vegetative state. I would argue that person, she couldn't speak, she couldn't contribute to society. As a baby, she was worth something. She grew up and she probably created value in the world. She had children, she got married, she did a bunch of things valuable in the world. And then this happened to her. And I don't think she's worth anything less just because she was incapable of performing value. Like the worth was, I think it's, from my perspective, it's consistent and static. It's not dynamic because she's worth as much as she was when she was born at the time she ends up as, in a vegetative state that your family decided to go ahead and, let her life run its course when that moment happened in your experience.
I can say what happened with less carefulness because it was my situation.
Yeah, it's not my situation, so I'm trying to be very careful. Right. I don't want to be triggering. I don't want to say anything insensitive. So please say it from your perspective.
So she had a grand mal seizure. It affected her heart and her lungs. Basically, it kind of short-circuited all of her involuntary muscles. And so everything stopped. It was in the middle of the night. So by the time the medics were able to get there, she had stopped breathing for basically, I think it was like a full 10 minutes is what they estimated. At that point, the brain it's dying, right? And it started to swell, which is what happens. And so her brain swelled to a point where she was in a persistent vegetative state, which basically means a coma that is very unlikely to be recovered from. And when she got to the hospital, they were keeping her alive with machines. And the doctors were like, listen, you don't come back from this one. Like, you just don't. And if there had been any chance that she could have recovered and come back, we would have kept her on machines. But that night, the family collectively, including her husband, decided that we were going to turn the machines off because she was effectively dead. She was brain dead and she was not going to recover, but the body was alive. And so what you're saying is, in a conversation around worth, does she have the same inherent worth in a persistent vegetative state that she will not be recovering from as she did the rest of her life?
Well, because we say as a baby, she had potential of value, like her worth would become more. Mm-hmm. We look at the potentiality at the end of her life when she's in that vegetative state. We could say, well, look at, like, it's not just inherent worth, which I believe in the value of life itself, but also all the things that she's connected to and all the people and children and husband, like all the stuff that she's connected to. So, and again, this might bear out personality types because this ostensibly is through the lens of type. Mm-hmm. I have ENFP preferences. I use authenticity, introverted feeling. So I have a tendency to focus on these kinds of things, like the worth of people, just because they are. They don't have to perform necessarily, in my mind,
right,
to have worthiness to be part of society. They can just be who they are and express exactly how they express. I'm not sure every personality type feels that way. I think some personality types look for more performative metrics for the worth of a human. And I'm not demonizing that. It's just a very different perspective than I have.
Right.
And so I, from my perspective, being my personality type, look at your sister and I say, she's worth something. The totality of her life, whether she's outputting or not, there's worth there. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe there's not value. Mm-hmm. She can't contribute value to the world after she has her seizure, but there's still worth. And so that's why I'm still, that worth growing and going more than value is I'm still having a hard time with this. I have to admit. Right. I feel foolish doing this publicly in front of everybody. I feel kind of like silly that I am having a hard time getting my head around these concepts. Maybe that's my ego. I'm probably saying that for ego covering reasons. So I'm not stupid, I promise. But it's this is a challenge for me. Honestly, it is.
Well, we're also talking about things that philosophers have been arguing about for thousands of years and haven't come to any,
fair enough,
definitive conclusion on.
Fair enough. I should give myself a pass a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we are talking very conceptually, and I'm glad you brought personality type in there because I think that's why we're saying personality type and self-worth and self-value. It's not even that I'm positing some sort of truth of the universe. It's more that I think wrestling with these questions and asking them of ourselves helps with, as mentioned, the original premise, which is self-awareness.
Yeah.
How do I actually feel about these things? What do I think about them? And I'm offering definitions. I'm offering ways of looking at them so that a person can go, I think you're dead wrong, which is great because now they're thinking about how they're thinking I'm dead wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
like the point.
That's the point. The point is to self-assess. How do I feel about this? Do I think I have worth as somebody who goes to my job every day and maybe is a C player and
a quiet quitter
and then comes home and, watches my stories on Netflix and, eats a Hungry Man TV dinner and then goes to bed? And the answer is, I think so. Right. And the example that you were talking about with my sister, I think that's actually a great example because, so my sister's name is Tina. Tina had great worth to us, even in a persistent vegetative state.
Yeah.
Where it was disturbing how she looked with her head swelled. It really was. It was a kind of, it was a horrifying experience and it took hours of agonizing decision making to get to the point where we said, no, we've got to make this choice.
Yeah.
And the reason why is even though she had great worth to us as a human, right? She was a family member. So she had high worth. She had worth as a mother. She had worth as a wife. She had worth as a sister. She had worth as a daughter. All right. She had great worth. And that was just a family. Yeah. And that's not including all her acquaintances and friendships. And the value of her life was done. She was not going to be able to output ever again. And her worth was diminished, right? She had worth to us as the memory of a relationship, but the worth she had as what was effectively was like a piece of meat that was being kept technically alive through machines. The worth was done, right? It was only going to take, and the amount of expense to keep her body alive when she would literally never wake up again. And it's not one of those things. It was like, well, it could have been a miraculous recovery in 20 years. Like the doctors was like, no, that's not going to happen. It's done. Like she's basically dead. She's brain dead. She's not going to come back. And the body can technically be kept alive through the pumping of air through the lungs, etc. But the experience is over. So the worth she had to us as a person, as the memory of a relationship, it was basically like, do we have worth and value and estimation when we're dead? We do not. So what was the worth? What was the intrinsic worth of her life as somebody in that situation? Nothing.
I want to push back on that a little bit and maybe create a distinction here, and you can push back on me, pushing back on you.
Okay.
So when you say that when we're dead, we don't have worth, value, or anything, estimation, or anything, well, I think that William Shakespeare has worth. He's been dead for years. Like there's worth of the things he produced.
Yes.
So maybe what we could say is that worth is time-bound. It's asynchronous because a baby, the reason why a baby has worth is the potential of the future, time-bound potentiality.
Yes.
And your sister has worth based on her past, time-bound what she did.
Right.
But value is synchronous.
Right. You got it.
Value is here and now.
Yes.
Value happens in real time.
You got it.
And I can't really time-bind value the way I can time-bind worth.
Well, I mean, we can create value in like art or production.
We've been able to do as humans with technology. Yeah, but in general, like as a human, in myself, like my worth is more inherent, asynchronous.
Right.
And maybe we could say value is more synchronous.
Yeah. What am I doing right now?
So asynchronous versus synchronous. Maybe time is the factor here that helps me make that clarity in my mind.
Yeah. Well, and value is demonstrated, right? And worth doesn't always have to be demonstrated to exist, but value does. Now, particularly when we're talking about our relationship to ourselves. I mean, there are some people, there was it might have been a book, but there was a movie called About a Boy, which had a character whose father had created a sensation Christmas carol that ended up bankrolling the rest of his life and his son's life, because it was like a Christmas carol that ended up, or a Christmas song that ended up being played on repeat every Christmas season. And that was enough. Like they lived off of those royalties. And the man who had written that song and was able to live on the royalties for the rest of his life ended up becoming an alcoholic. And his son, who never had to work a day in his life, ended up becoming somebody who had like no purpose in life. So he had created value in the world, enough value to be able to live on it in perpetuity. But what was his self-value, right? And so our self-value is also, like, I think you're right. I think it's in the moment. It's like, what are we doing right now to demonstrate our value? What are we doing to give, to contribute, to give back? And I think worth, like we have intrinsic worth. And like you said, it's time bound.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, it's not going away until we die. Right. And you're right. Some of the things that we produced of value can live on outside of us. But our worth, our intrinsic worth it's sort of like, okay, are we becoming who we were supposed to be? At 25, my worth is different than at 45. But at 25, I still have worth because of what I'm going to be at 45, right? So worth is it's something that I think a person should give themselves permission to rest into. That it's okay if you're not demonstrating it right now. It evolves, right? There's always more to discover about who you are. Your worth lives inside. And you can rest into being a person who has worth, regardless of whether or not you're demonstrating it. You get to just rest into this. This is something that people who use introverted feeling or authenticity, the FPs, they just instinctively know about themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree to that.
Our value, our demonstration of all of that, that doesn't get set in stone. We can give something of value and feel great about it 1 minute and then just screw around for the rest of our lives and never do anything else. And we're not going to feel a sense of self-value if we screw around. We have to continue to demonstrate it in order for us to get the benefit of feeling like we're a person of value.
Okay. I think it's a little more clear.
Okay.
Again, we're in the realm of philosophy, and I have to admit that, that's the area we're at. And like you said, people have debated for centuries about these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the distinction that you're helping create here between worth and value, at least in my mind. Hopefully you listening are getting some distinctions for yourself. You may agree, disagree, I don't know, but at least the conversation started, which I think is the important aspect of it. And how does this relate to us? Particularly, how does it relate to us through the lens of personality type?
Right. So I think our worth has nothing to do with type, right? No matter what personality type you are, even if, like I said, the people who understand this the most instinctively are people who have introverted feeling or authenticity, but it doesn't matter your personality type. You have worth as a living organic creature that has consciousness and reflects the universe back to itself.
I was going to make a joke and be like, well, no, but I agree with you. I agree with you.
Right. Well, and they also, introverted feeling or authenticity. Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
That don't have the value. That's funny. I thought you meant some introverted feeling or authenticity people don't understand that they have intrinsic value.
I was going to make the joke from my perspective. There's some types that don't have the worth.
Right. Yeah.
Because I overvalue my experience. And so I was going to make the joke, and I thought, people might think I'm being serious. So I made a statement about making a joke. Anyway, let's move on.
Don't make jokes, Joel.
That fell flat. Let's just move on. Didn't work out.
Don't create the wet firecrackers, Joel. And especially with and if people do get offended, they can revert back to our 2-part podcast on getting triggered because I think that's a good one. What I love about having laid down that track is anytime anybody gets offended, I'm just going to link them to that podcast on getting triggered.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, this is my go-to now. I'm not 100% convinced that that's not why we created this podcast.
We will be right back. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker. Now back to the show.
So now that we've laid the track of understanding the difference between esteem, worth, and value, and the reason why I think this is all really important is even though esteem and value might be they might be right next to each other. In fact, on the Venn diagram, they're practically the same thing.
Yeah.
The way that they're distinct is that in my observation, the best way to get to self-esteem is through our judging functions, just as an awareness technique or tool. It's not the sum total of it. It's not complete, but it's a great access point.
And we talked about it in the last episode.
Exactly.
Note, if you haven't heard that, you should go listen to it. It's good.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. So that's why esteem is a little bit different, is because it's a slightly different access tool. Worth, you just get to have that. You just get to have it, right? Unless you're a nihilist and believe in nothing and think that, there's no preciousness to any of this, which is fine. You're allowed to believe that if you want to. But I also think that there is value, no matter what your personality type, to getting into the introverted feeling or authenticity aspect of yourself to go, well, maybe I should be alive. Maybe this is an okay ride. As bad as it can get, yeah, there's worth here. Right? There's a reason why it's okay for me to exist, and I should rest into the fact that I have intrinsic worth, right? Even if it's not demonstrated, it just exists. And it might just be in potentiality, right? The worth that I have might not be demonstrated for a while, but that doesn't mean I lack worth. I get to have it.
So from a personality type standpoint, I don't know if you're going down into perceiving functions, but I'll stay with judging functions. That makes a lot of sense to me. I overvalue my own experience, though, coming from an FP perspective. I'm an ENFP type preferences. And I have authenticity, introverted feeling. It is my perspective that self-worth idea is, everybody gets it. And everybody has introverted feeling in their cognition. It just might not be a strength. It might be in their shadow. But that's the providence of introverted feeling or authenticity, is the worth of a human life or a living life, a creature that's alive. And I would contrast that with, let's say, TP types that use introverted thinking or accuracy, who I don't think rest into worth as much. In fact, there almost seems to be an anxiety to demonstrate competence and value to compensate for the lack of certainty around how much worth they have. That's again, from my perspective, does that resonate with you as a TP, a accuracy introverted thinking user?
Yeah, worth almost always has to be demonstrated or it doesn't exist, I think, to some extent. And I think because introverted thinking or accuracy disassociates from self when it's being used. So it's more trying to hone itself as opposed to celebrating its intrinsicness. And there's value to that too. We need people who are reminding others that we can get better, that we can be better. The process of getting better has value as well. And I would argue that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether or not you think you should be getting better. There is resting into one's worth right here, right now is one of the best ways to offset all of this insecurity and beating yourself up and like free up your mental real estate for self-improvement by just resting into the fact that you have worth as living organic tissue with consciousness. It's like, it kind of doesn't matter about the rest of it.
Yeah.
And your worth increases by becoming more of what you started out as, right? And so this is why healing work is so important. If you go off the rails because your parents did a number on you or life did a number on you, right? Somebody did a number on you and you're off the rails of your relationship to self and you're separated from self and you're in all of this pain.
Did a number on you, people that English maybe isn't their first language.
Oh, sorry.
What does that mean?
Messed you up.
Yeah, thank you.
Caused trauma. Hurt you. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to use an old-timey colloquialism. But yeah, like if you got off the path, and I think that this is fundamentally going all the way back to Jungian concepts, this is like individuation is the discovery of one's intrinsic worth over time. That's what individuation is. It's finding yourself. It's finding more of yourself. It's learning who you are in whole self. And as you find yourself in whole self, like why would anybody go on that path? Because there's worth there. There's something to mine. There's something to discover. And the more associated we are with our, sort of who we were meant to be, the more we rest into intrinsic worth, right? I don't have to demonstrate it. I just am. But it also is demonstrated, so awesome. Does it make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So then there's value. And value is, what do I have to offer? As I evidence my worth through discovering more of myself and individuating and mining for gold inside of whatever this incredible creature is that I am, regardless of what everybody else says, because screw those guys, right? They don't know. But like, I'm constantly and perpetually discovering all of the many different aspects of myself, and I'm finding myself to be, worth the spelunking trip inside. What do I have to offer? What is my demonstrated value? Like, what is my usefulness?
Yeah.
And that is more of like an extroverted thinking or effectiveness concept, right? Usefulness. What is useful?
Yeah.
But without giving value to others, then I actually end up becoming a closed system. And closed systems are the ones that are the most vulnerable to entropy. If I'm only inside myself, if I'm only doing an internal spelunking, but I'm never bringing those gifts to the outer world, well, the other part of myself is that I am evolutionarily wired to be part of a society, right? We're 90% ape, 10% bee.
Yeah.
And I need to be a contributor. So when I demonstrate my value, when I take all of this worth and all this like more and more understanding of myself and my worth and my understanding of my value, and I demonstrate it and I am useful to the rest of society, all of it just gets buoyed up. It's like, yay. Yeah. the experience of that is yay.
So then we talked about value being real time, or at least more synchronous, maybe worth being asynchronous. I just came up with two other qualities of value based on what you just said that I think resonate with me. One is value is topical. And I'll just say this, that my value, my self-perceived value as a podcaster is very high. And I'm hoping other people see that. I think it is. I think it's high. It's higher than, other people that don't do podcasting because I'm demonstrating it on a podcast. My value as an NFL linebacker
is pretty low.
Is terribly low. I don't have the body shape or size for it or
the training,
anything. So it's topical in that I can demonstrate value in one category, but I can't in another. And that doesn't alter my self-worth. I'm still who I am and I'm still worthy as a human, even though I can't demonstrate value in a certain channel or topic that maybe other people only measure. Like maybe they only care about linebackers. Like they only care about NFL linebackers. Like maybe a sports agent or somebody. Like they don't even look at me as a podcaster. They have no way to evaluate me in their life because they're looking for actual NFL linebackers.
Right.
So it's topical. However, let's say the NFL went on strike and all the quote unquote legitimate linebackers are unavailable for some reason or whatever reason they're unavailable.
And they pull on the podcasters
and they and there's an opportunity for me. So it's relative too, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
There's a movie, what is it? The Replacements with Keanu Reeves. Basically all the NFL goes on strike. It made me think about this. And then he and a bunch of other like amateurs end up playing in the NFL for a season while it's on strike in the 1980s. And, hilarity ensues in this comedy. Right. But the point is, the value is relative there. They could demonstrate value because there was an opportunity. So value is real time or synchronous. It's topical and it's relative. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to keep making the list if there's more, but none of that changes the worth. Mm-mm. Like I'm still worth something. Mm-hmm. It's just the topical channel of value and the output. Mm-hmm. I think that helps me create a distinction too, because then I can really see, again, from a type perspective, somebody might be demonstrating value in front of me. And because of my type preferences, I can't see it. Mm-hmm. I can't read the value they're giving. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. Somebody might not be able to read the value I'm giving out.
Right. Exactly. And just to make a little note about esteem or estimation, the person who is looking for top-notch podcasters could be using, say, extroverted thinking or effectiveness. And
our numbers aren't high enough for them or something, right? Is that what you're saying? I jumped the gun.
You totally jumped the gun.
I patted where you're going and it wasn't right.
It wasn't right. No, the person who is seeking top-notch podcasters and the person who is seeking NFL linebackers for a draft might both be using extroverted thinking or effectiveness.
Yeah.
And or the people who is the podcaster and the person who is the linebacker might be using extroverted thinking or effectiveness to self-assess. So that is their metric is how good they're doing on that. But they're looking at it in two totally different areas. And so knowing what metrics you're using is valuable regardless of the content, right? Whereas a person who is introverted feeling authenticity in both of those are like, do I feel like being a podcaster is in alignment with who I am? Do I feel like being a linebacker is in alignment with who I am, right? It's the same metric, but it's two totally different contexts. And the value is completely different as well. So that's why knowing how we're estimating things is important. What's my criteria? But then separating that from the value, because like you said, the value is now topical.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that helped at all, but
yeah.
Okay. So now let's weave type in as almost like a, not an afterthought, but like as a way to kind of...
As we land the plane.
Exactly. So I have ENTP preferences. And there are millions of ENTPs on the planet, and we're all doing something kind of different because we're not the same person. And so all of us are doing, like some ENTPs are literal scientific inventors, and some ENTPs are CEOs, and some ENTPs are stay-at-home moms, and some ENTPs are podcasters, and some ENTPs are like, name a million different ways that this can roll out, and ENTPs are all over the place, right? Some of them are fry cooks.
Some are good people.
Some of them are
I'm
even
kidding.
good
That
people.
Was, again, a joke.
It's better to not say you're sorry. All right, just if you're gonna pick on ENTPs, just land it.
I know, but then all the FJs are like, oh, don't pick on them.
Don't pick on the ENTPs. They don't have the resources to be able to deal with it.
Anyway, continue your point.
So, thank you. So there's all these different ENTPs.
Yes.
Right. We're all going to go, am I competent and capable, and do people like me? That's going to be our metric, right? That's how we're going to esteem ourselves, or that's going to be an access point to how we're estimating how whether or not, we're good people or we're doing the thing we're supposed to be doing. We are probably going to undervalue our intrinsic worth because that introverted feeling or authenticity is way in our shadow. So we're probably going to go, I have to have, I don't have intrinsic worth, right? I have to have demonstrated worth. Well, then that means ENTPs as a collective are probably not giving themselves the due they should with their worth, right? You get to believe you have worth. You get to just feel that way as long as you're continuing to become more of your manifest self. That said, what is our value? How are we determining our value? And our value is how good of a stay-at-home mom, literal scientific inventor, CEO, fry cook, podcaster. Like how much am I throwing into this? Am I doing a good job here? Am I offering my best? Well, then I'll be able to have a sense of self-value because my usefulness is increasing. This is why, by the way, I think this whole time period of trying to send messages to businesses and to corporations and to whatever, that the concept of quiet quitting. I know the first time I heard quiet quitting, the definition is very different than what I hear now. The first time it was basically go to your job and collect a paycheck and don't do anything, right? That was the first time I heard quiet quitting. Now it's well, I'm just not going to do overtime. I'm these are two totally different concepts. So which one is it? Not doing overtime is called having boundaries. Sitting there and collecting a paycheck when you're not doing your job, that sounds more like quiet quitting to me. But regardless of whatever it is.
Sure.
I think these messages that people are trying to give to corporations are actually undermining their self-value because it's putting them in situations where they're not giving their best. And so it's undermining their ability to see themselves at their best. And so they're actually hurting themselves. It's much better to actually quit and go someplace where you feel appreciated or whatever your criteria is and give your best so you can see your value, you can see your usefulness, and then have self-value, right? So that's why I think it's important to kind of understand our access point on all of this, but to go, if I don't have self-value, I'm looking at myself as an ENTP. What is the value that ENTPs give, right? What's the, what am I stewarding here? What am I a part of? I'm a part of this group of people that are all stewarding something. So the first thing I think every person should do once they understand their personality type is to go, I'm a part of a collective of people, or a group, not collective, but I'm a part of a group of people that are pre-wired or cognitively wired to give what to the world? What are we supposed to, why am I wired this way? What am I giving to society? What am I doing here? And the answer is, I understand concepts quickly. I pattern very fast.
You yourself, particularly.
Yeah. Well, ENTPs, That's what we got the pattern quick card. All right.
Yep.
It was pick a card, any card. And we grabbed one and it said extroverted intuition or exploration. And it said you pattern very quickly, right? And you collect models and you understand things at a 20,000 foot view very fast and put you in a brainstorming session and off you go. All right. So I picked that one, and then I also picked the introverted thinking or accuracy card, which said, and also you're gonna get a little too pedantic when you explain things to people, and they're not gonna understand what you're saying. But if you get really good at explaining, you can help people understand deeper concepts and understand how they can improve themselves and go on the process of self-improvement and become better versions of themselves. And also you can represent truth and accuracy and transparency in a way where you don't let people off the hook. You don't let them believe whatever they want to in their fantasy land. You remind people that the emperor has no clothes on. All right. So you pattern recognize and you remind people that the emperor has no clothes on, and you shove those two things together. What can you give of high value to the world? Right? What is your highest value? And if I'm not giving my highest value at the moment in the timeline in which I'm in, why would I expect to have self-value? Right? Why would I expect to get the magical sense of self-value if I'm not demonstrating it, if I'm not useful in my own way? So to bring it back to self-awareness, self-esteem, I know I'm going to be using introverted thinking, accuracy, and extroverted feeling or harmony. I know I'm going to be using those, right? And they're going to be judging me in certain ways. And I need to make sure that those tools are well calibrated, and I need to make sure that the part of me that is uncertain in that area is reminding me of important things, but I'm not believing it when it makes me insecure. So once I have a lock on that, and I go, okay, I need to be competent, capable. I need to make myself the process, get better, improve, calibrate, become more competent. and give back and give to the world, right? In an extroverted feeling harmony way, and, say things in ways that other people can receive them and build relationships, and, fundamentally don't be too much of a dick. Okay. So that's that part. Self-worth. I'm not going to think I have any worth intrinsically, but I do. And so maybe I need to go find that, right? Even if I have to spend 45 minutes philosophizing about it, I have worth, right? And understand that my sister, who was brain dead, had worth, right? To me. So I probably have worth as well, and rest into that and allow myself to kind of relax and not be like, oh God, do I have worth and value in the world? Rest into that. And then go, am I demonstrating that? Am I giving my value to the world in a way that I and other people can experience it? And then that routes back to going, the potential worth I had before, I am now manifesting that. I am becoming the best version of myself as an ENTP. And there's all these other access points that have nothing to do with type, by the way. But this is just a really handy one to have an on-ramp to higher self-awareness and asking myself how I feel about all these things and asking myself if I'm doing my best. And if I am, I have permission to relax into that and to stop beating myself up.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental premise.
So the only, not caveat, but the only modification I'd make to this, I'm trying to put myself in you listening, your shoes. If you're a person that's not attuned to things the way Antonia and I are talking about them, because I almost probably 99% agree with the framework you're coming from, Antonia. This idea of there's these energies of the world, each type basically is an indicator of which energies we're attuned to. So as an ENFP preferences, I'm attuned to exploration or extroverted intuition, quick patterning, introverted feeling authenticity, what's resonant, core values, motivations, intent, all of that. So I understand that. And what we're framing it in, I can just imagine someone's listening right now and they're like, you guys keep framing it in social frameworks, what you're contributing to people and the world. And are you saying, are you, Joel and Antonia, saying that I don't have value unless I'm contributing to society? I only have worth. And because I don't have that on my short list, real time, topical, or relative, are we saying on here that society is the metric that is required for value to be demonstrated? Because I can just imagine someone's like, I don't agree with that premise.
Right. No, I think that's I think society is my shorthand way of saying
reality. And so there's probably ways. I was begging the question to answer it, not legitimately asking you, but I appreciate you answering really too. I think what we're actually saying is demonstrating value in the way that your personality type is wired, and your personhood outside of your type too is wired to demonstrate value. Yeah. But that gets convoluted.
Well, I mean, okay, the first thing that pops up for me is the movie Castaway that had Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
There wasn't anybody on the island that he was on, as demonstrated by the fact that his best friend became a volleyball, right? So with a blood print on it, and eyeballs drawn into the blood print. It's so there was nobody there. There's no society there.
Yeah.
But man, did he demonstrate value like crazy for himself by keeping himself alive. If he just rolled over, right, and allowed himself to drown or do nothing, the ride's over. But he demonstrated a ton of value by keeping himself alive long enough to save himself. I am sure that when he re-entered society, there was no questions. He had no insecurities, right? He had been through something that had demonstrated his concept of his own worth to fight for his ability to exist, and his value as a person who could keep himself alive in the most hostile circumstances possible. So that wasn't contributing to society, but it certainly was evidencing value. And I'm sure he had a lot of security around that afterwards.
And so that's the point I wanted to land. We're not talking about society value.
Mm-mm.
We said self-value for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, again, the measurement's going to come back on our footing. We as people have to evaluate. We have to esteem or estimate our value and worth based on our own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the world will tell us what they value from us.
Right.
And what they have worthiness for us in.
Yeah. Oh, they certainly will. In comment sections anyway.
Yeah. Anything from comment sections to likes to paychecks to whatever the world, quote unquote, puts measured value on top of.
Mm-hmm.
but we're talking about self-value. And I think that illustration of Tom Hanks on that island in that movie is a great example of demonstrating self-value in an extreme way, but it gets the point. It gets to the point. Yeah. And again, I think that each of us wired differently is going to demonstrate a little differently. So we talked a little bit, maybe just hit the other two judging functions real quick, just to satisfy the person. It's like,
do it.
Are you going to talk about my type?
Yes, I know I was talking about ENTP, but you talk about...
I think we talked about, I talked about introverted feeling or authenticity as kind of the vanguard of the steward of self-worth. I really do think that's where everybody has access to self-worth. Everybody is worth something. But it feels like to me that introverted feeling or authenticity has an access line to it. Like we're preoccupied by it. We're interested in it. Accuracy, introverted thinking, the TPs, all TPs use that. They seem to be focused on competency, demonstrating competent optimization of the self. That seems to be the focus there. Let's turn our attention to the TJs who use extroverted thinking or effectiveness. And it's probably way more metricized of are you outputting, like from the self? If I was a TJ, I'd probably say to myself, am I getting the job done? Am I contributing? Am I getting a result at the end of the day? And if I'm not, I'm probably going to have a sense of low self-value. Extroverted feeling is probably the harmony I create, the needs I get met, and the ways that I am contributing to the people around me, whether they're local or extended. It's a sense of how I'm connected and contributing to that system so it's flowing well. I think that's probably how an FJ using harmony or extroverted feeling would measure their value in the world.
I do think, though, that, and we don't have time to go through all the perceiving functions, but I do think that this is a little bit more associated with whole type than it is necessarily just judging functions like self-esteem was. I think our decision-making functions or thinking or feeling functions are a fantastic access point to be able to understand the metrics we're using to determine our self-esteem, our estimation of ourselves. But I think when it comes to value, this is a place where whole type really comes in because I want to be using every aspect of what I know about myself. I want to be using my intuition and my sensing. I want to be using my thinking and my feeling. I want to be using whole self. And I think that's why that concept of individuation, which is understanding your whole self and bringing it all in, right? And this is where you don't really have to understand cognitive functions. You can just understand yourself as your personality type, right? You can just know that you're an ISTP or an ENFJ or whatever. You can just know that and go, what do I know I'm good at? What do I know, where do I know I contribute? What do I think is my best manifest self, right? Where am I supposed to be right now? What are my skills and my traits and my tools and my characteristics? How do I give of myself? And I say society because that's where most of us live. Most of us understand ourselves in terms of being a contributing member of society. But it doesn't have to be social, right? It doesn't have to be cultural. It can be that I'm building something. I can be, like in Alaska, and I'm a homesteader and I built my log cabin, and that's demonstrated value, right? And there's not a person around, but it's still demonstrated value and it suits me and I feel good about it. But most of us are integrated with society. And so it's what is my place in all of this? And I think all of it contributes, no matter how much we know about ourselves. And so our type is an access point to go, people like me, what do we do? What do we offer? And am I offering that in my own little niche in the world, in my own little way, no matter what I'm doing, no matter whether I'm an astronaut or an underwater basket weaver? Am I contributing to the thing that I'm doing in the highest potential I have in this moment? And am I resting into my worth? Am I resting into, am I giving myself permission to believe that I am worth this introspection, that I'm worth improvement and improving myself over time and giving myself pats on the back when I do a good job, and I'm worth individuating, and I think that our personality type it helps us understand why we might question all of that, where we'll question it, but it also gives us mile markers for where we could be. Because we can look at other people who are wired like us, other people of our same personality type, and see where they're at, not comparing ourselves to them and going, oh, I suck because I'm not here. But we can use them as a model of oh, that's where we could get to? Cool. That's awesome. So that kind of helps me understand where I could be at. And if I keep going along this way, maybe I can demonstrate a value similar to that, maybe not in that specific way, maybe not with as much fanfare or publicity or celebrity or success, but I could have success in the way that I define it by giving value to my little ecosystem at the highest potential possible. And I think that's where whole type comes in. So I wouldn't want to reduce it down to just certain functions. I would say a deep dive into one's personality type, understanding what we're capable of as, wired the way that we are, looking for examples of people who do it well.
Yeah.
I think all of this is a way to really kind of set a trajectory of value.
Thank you for the reminder too, because I agree with you. One of the challenges people have when they approach personality hacker material is a lot of people that are into personality types want something to be brought down to, well, ENTPs do this in like a little 3-minute snippet where you can have a timestamp on it.
Yeah, tell me the timestamp of when you talked about my type.
It's like, that's not how it works, because the point that puts people in boxes, really. That digitizes the information down to stereotypes. And it clearly, like, type is way more than that. So what we tend to do here is we talk about principle-based ideas, and we give some examples on applying these to type. And the reason we do that is because you are wired uniquely, not just in one of 16 types, but you're one of 7 billion people on the planet at the time of this recording. And the personality type that you are can show you just how different you are from everybody else, just how unique you are. So, and your life is extremely unique. We don't know exactly your circumstances. So we talk about principles and give some examples on how to tie this to your life. And if you're listening and you have the capacity for this, not everybody's at this level, but if you have the capacity to take the core principle and then apply it to how you're wired personally, I think magic can happen for you. Mm-hmm. So as we've been talking about this, what are you taking from some of these principles? As you think about and reflect upon your own individual personality, how your mind is wired, how you learn information, how you make decisions, how are you applying what we've talked about with, on the last episode, self-esteem, but on this episode, self-worth and self-value? How are you applying that to the way you show up to the world, to how you see yourself as worthy, as just a human being, just because you are worthy? And then how are you connecting it to the type of value you'll demonstrate and realize your full potential? If you choose, again, it's your life, you get to operate it any way you want. How are you choosing to use some of the concepts we talked about today? I'd love to hear about that. I think Antonia would too. If you would come over to personalityhacker.com directly below this episode, leave a comment, ask a question. More importantly, share your story. Stories are amazing because they're condensed or captured experiences that help us get an insight into things you've experienced in your life. So stories can be very illustrative, and I'd love for you to come and make your voice heard, how you're making these principles real in your life.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, that helps us out a lot. We're also on YouTube. You might be watching this video podcast right now. If you enjoyed this episode, you can like, subscribe, and there's like a little bell icon that lets you know when a new episode comes out. So you can hit that one too. And you can also leave us a comment. We have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it on major book retailers. And if you leave us a rating and review on Amazon, on Goodreads, that also helps us out a lot. Did I do good, by the way, with this YouTube thing?
Man, you are nailing it.
I'm nailing it this time. We have a suite of programs that are personal growth oriented through the lens of personality type. Strongly recommend you go check them out. We have some fantastic owner's manuals that are deep dives into your personality type. Helps you understand things like your cognitive functions and a deep dive into what it means to be a person of your personality type. We talk about, the phenomena like loops and grips and all sorts of elements that really allow you to navigate through your type in terms of how the rubber hits the road in your personal life. So head over to personalityhacker.com and check out the owner's manuals. And if you're still unsure about your personality type, you can take the assessment online as well and get an idea of your personality type and then pick up an owner's manual.
Those owner's manuals are really designed to give you the building blocks to create your own plan in your life, your own owner's manual. We're not here to tell you who you are or how you have to be in the world. We're here to give you some core principles and tools. And I think they're great. I think it's great because you can apply it to your specific situation. So yeah, check those out. I think they're really amazing tools. We put a lot of time and effort into building these, and I think they will move the needle in your life.
Yeah.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you, yes, you, on the next Personality Hacker podcast. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.